Ready, Greg?
Ready, Jay.
You're listening to The Success Paradigm with your hosts, Jay Atkins and Greg Gray.
Well, Greg, I'm excited about our next guest. I've known this gentleman personally for 20 years myself. The person that we're getting ready to interview and learn tons from is Bill White. Bill White is widely recognized as one of our nation's most respected advocates for the nation's military and veteran families. He has raised over $2 billion to support our fallen and injured heroes, and more than $3 billion for private equity, real estate, and hedge funds. He is twice the recipient of the Meritorious Public Service Award for extraordinary service from the U.S. Coast Guard and for the outstanding support from the U.S. Navy. Bill was the CEO of the Intrepid Museum in New York City for almost 20 years and is one of the founders of the Intrepid Fallen Heroes Fund. He is currently the CEO of Constellations Group in Atlanta. He has also co-authored the book Intrepid, the epic story of America's most legendary warship. Bill and his life partner, Brian Ure, who is Senior Vice President at Global Insurance Brokerage Willis Towers Watson, resides in the great state of Georgia. Bill White, welcome.
Hi, Jay. How are you?
I'm good, my
So
friend.
nice to be with you and Greg. Wow.
Yeah,
I feel very humbled to be with you today.
so I had to try to pull some stuff out of your bio that is very, very accomplished, and that's why I wanted to invite you on here because I've admired you for many, many years. From the age of 26 when I met you. So I want to get you on here and kind of share. And then the biggest reason I want to get on here is you always hear about people saying that your network is your net worth. And you are the epitome of that. I just want to talk about that today, but welcome. Thanks for joining Greg and I on this and sharing your knowledge with all the people that are listening.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you and a very generous introduction. And it's always been a pleasure just watching you grow and to see everything that you've been doing with your life. And Greg, it's great to meet you. You two probably make a lot of trouble together, which is great. I'm going to be going back to watch all these podcasts now. I'm fascinated with what you're both doing. So it's a great pleasure to be with you both today. And Jay, I just wanted to tell you, you read something from the work with the military, and I always think of you and your service to the United States Air Force, and I've always held that in the highest regard. It's one of those great attributes that you have accomplished, and I think it's helped you tremendously to be a great leader, to be a great friend, to be a wonderful father, a wonderful husband, and it's a great lesson today to see the military coming to help everybody on the front lines. And I couldn't let that go without saying thank you for your service also.
Thank you.
Well, of course, this is the first time we've ever met, Bill. And in the first 45 seconds, I see, and I know why you're on here, without even talking about all the things you've accomplished, just the quality of what you just did and the gift you just gave, Jay, is awesome. So thank you so much. One of the things that we talk about in every one of these podcasts is the fact that when it comes to success, everybody admires the glory, but very few people understand or can appreciate the story. And there's always a story. So we ask very quirky questions for the people listening. Yeah, he's laughing already.
Hold on, let me put my seatbelt on. Give me a minute. Okay.
So just like on all the podcasts, we don't tell the guests what the questions are going to be because part of why you're here is because of the rich authenticity that you express yourself with. So I get the first question, and this is one of my favorite ones. So I would like you, Bill, to picture yourself in an auditorium full of middle schoolers. I'm just curious, what would you offer to them as your most important advice? So just a room full of kids, what would you tell them?
Well, Greg, you got me there. And I have actually spoken to a group of middle school kids up in New Jersey about 15 years ago, and I completely bombed. So what I thought I wanted to say to that group started to fall on deaf ears, and I just turned to everybody and I said, "This is probably not what you want to hear, right?" And they all screamed, "Yes," meaning they don't want to hear it, right? They even knew the contractions, right? So I said, "What do you want to hear?" They said, "We want to hear about you." So, I was talking about patriotism. I was talking about, they should study, which is what I didn't do. They should consider this, and nobody likes to be told what to do. So, I think the greatest lesson I've ever learned in life is something about friendship. And when you're in middle school and you're growing up, your friends are really the fabric of your life, and the quality of your friendships really, I think, is a testament to who you are. The more special your bonds are, the more important you treat them, the way you honor your friends, obviously your family and your faith and all that. But with regard to the middle school students, I imparted to them after I found out they didn't want to hear anything else I wanted to talk about. We talked about friendship. So I asked them what a friend meant to them. And I was told by a 97-year-old mentor of mine who Jay has heard a lot about over the years. His name was Mike Stern, and he was a famous war correspondent who was the first American to go into the Auschwitz camps at the end of the war. He was a Jewish army corporal. And he told me something very valuable. He said, "Hey, Billy, you will never, ever have a true friend in life unless and until you are a friend to that person first. You'll never have a true friend unless and until you are a friend to that person first." So that maybe sound a little euphoric, but it's a time-tested thing for me, and it's been working since day one. So we talked to those middle school students about honoring your friends, cherishing your friends, honoring them with the truth of your word, right? Because our word is the only thing we have. We could have a lot of nice things. We could have a lot of material things. But really all we have at the end of the day is our name. And that's a word, right? So words mean a lot. So that actually had some value to the kids. And we ended up having a great set of breakout sessions. So I think having good relationships, having quality friendships, valuing those as if they were, just as close as family, to me has been very helpful. And that's been helpful in business. That's been helpful in politics, which I've been in my whole life. It's been helpful for others to judge how I value my friendships. And that's then how they actually judge whether they're going to do business with me and my company. And how you treat people, how you interact with people, I think is a thing that people do notice. So, telling young people that, when they're fighting with each other, when they're bullying each other, or when they're, being tough on each other, I think trying to remember that in all of the busyness of the world is really important for the betterment of myself as somebody who likes to continuously grow even at age 53.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So, Bill, I mean that we never had this discussion before. I'm really glad that we get this format. But again, one of the masterful things that I've seen you do is build these amazing networks, and I think that is you find friends first, and then you build a network. And I see that you have relationships. You know a lot about people. You ask a lot of questions. So, thank you for that takeaway. So, Greg kind of opened up about all the glory, and no one knows a story. And I've gotten pieces of you and conversations that we've had from the days of culinary school and driving an ambulance in New York City, that I know about you, and then someone trusting you to run a big charity ship. I mean, just at a very, very young age, someone trusted you. So why don't you go back and let the listeners know kind of where Bill White was born from the very beginning, and let us hear that story.
you want me to go back to when in the manger, or not that far back? Okay, not that far back. We'll speed up, Greg.
Yeah, I would.
Greg's like, oh no, don't go back to the
Actually,
manger.
that was very appealing to me, actually, Bill. I was excited about that.
Start when you're comfortable. I mean, I guess when we got out of high school, we're lost. You know, maybe you weren't. But just kind of the you know, even talk about the failures. You know, some of the things that you learned through the process that got you to the place of being able to raise billions of dollars for funds. I mean, that's a big number. That's not easy to do if you don't have relationships.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you for saying that too, Jay. I think growing up as an only child in a small town in Long Island with two great parents who adopted me 4 days before I was born, also tells, I don't know what happened there. Are you guys there?
Yeah, you're still
here.
Yep.
Oh, sorry about that.
No
I
worries.
have to turn my phone off. I apologize because a phone call came in. You laugh where it came from. I'll tell you about it later. But I'm working on, here's news. We're working on producing an amazing 4th of July celebration for the President of the United States. And that call was from the White House. So they're going to have to wait.
Wow. I'm feeling kind of special right now.
I kid you not. Right. So anyway, we can talk about that whenever. But so growing up as an only child, right, I was adopted. So that there's, you know, things in that, I think, which have had relevance in my life. A lot of people like you, Jay, right, have, you know, met my parents. You know, they've since passed away. They were great parents. They taught me a lot about faith and friendship and honoring our neighbor, right? So I learned a lot about that as a young age. And when I finished Chaminade High School, which was an all-boys Catholic high school in Long Island, I realized in that 4-year experience, I had a lot of great bonding experiences with great young men. And I don't want anybody to think that sounds strange for an openly gay guy to say that. These were quality relationships, quality people who I still maintain relationships with today, very, very close friends of mine. And they've gone off into business, into these great positions. Really, it's a fantastic school, Chaminade High School in New York. And then I went to Fordham University in the Bronx, and I had decided I wanted to be a doctor. I had gotten my EMT license, my paramedic license. I was a member of the Point Lookout Lido Fire Department. I was the youngest captain in the rescue company in New York State, in the history of New York State. And I was also a captain of a boat. I had a license called a pilot license with the U.S. Coast Guard. So we could take 100-ton vessels out 100 miles at sea. I was 16 years old. So I got involved in a lot of things at a young age, whether they were altruistic, you know, helping others with being a fireman, getting up at 4 a.m, putting on your jeans, tripping down the stairs and going, you know, to help an elderly neighbor. You know, some people we saved, some people we lost. It was a lot to see at a young age. A lot of car accidents at 3 a.m. You know, I'll never forget responding to a car accident with a limousine that was hit. And in the limousine was the bride, the groom, the wedding party, and a car had run into that vehicle, and it killed the whole wedding party. All 9 people in the limousine were taken from this world, and I was, you know, there pulling people out of the car, and that was a harrowing experience. And we tried to save people. We were able to save the driver of the car. Why, I don't know. But I think that taught me a lot about valuing life and valuing taking care of others and trying our best to you know, to worry about folks. But when I was at Fordham, I realized that there was an ambulance corps. They had a blue Suburban van that they would throw, you know, somebody in the back seat and drive them to the hospital in the middle of the Bronx. And we had started a group called the Fordham University Emergency Medical Service. It was a group of young students who got together and who essentially created a volunteer ambulance corps. It was the largest extracurricular activity at Fordham University. We ended up responding to over 1,000 calls a year. By the time I graduated, we raised about $15 million, and we had 4 ambulances and 200 members. And we were the first volunteer ambulance corps to be created in the city of New York in 58 years. There was a lot of politics. You had to go meet the mayor. You had to talk to the Jesuit president. You had to talk to the board of trustees. We had to raise the money. We went to donors. We had to schmooze the EMT corps, the ambulance service, the fire department, the big bosses in Little Italy, right? Even the mafia guys we had to go talk to tell them we weren't doing bad things, that we were here to help them. And we even got donations from the Castellano crime family, which we gladly accepted.
Cash is cash.
Saving lives.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned a lot from that. And then I went to work in my father's restaurant business in New York. And this is where things changed. And you know the story, Jay. But Greg, I was working in the restaurant business. My father had 5 restaurants in New York. He made me go to chef school, bartending school. I cleaned the toilets. I did the dishes. I bounced people out of the restaurant. I was a bouncer. I was the union negotiator. I was the purveyor of tomatoes, right? You learn a lot about the business that way, right?
Right.
And when I was doing that, Desert Storm, Desert Shield happened. So 1991, and I felt very quietly inside, I knew that I was gay, and that I couldn't really go serve in the military because there was a policy against gays serving in the military. And I want to raise my hand and say, I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. So help me God. And then
that policy was called Don't Tell.
Yeah, don't ask, don't tell, right? Well, you're going to ask me, and then I'm going to have to tell, and so don't ask me, and then I don't have to lie. But that's not how that policy worked out. So I felt I wanted to do something to help our nation's military. And I got together with a friend of mine from Chaminade High School, Tim O'Neill, and we started a charity called Operation Support. And we ended up going on CNN, and we ended up meeting some great people. I do not pat myself on the back. There were 100 young volunteers from all across different businesses in New York, all across the country. And we raised millions of dollars for the men and women killed in Desert Storm and Desert Shield. And at that dinner, Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf, Colin Powell, Secretary of the Navy, Jay, the Secretary of the Air Force, right? All these great people. And this one businessman who I had tried to get to come to the dinner by the name of Zachary Fisher called me the day of, and he said, I'd like to come to your dinner. And I said, sure. And he had sent a check for $50,000. All the money was going to the USO, 100% of it. Not a single penny was being taken out for any of us or anything, right? We wanted to be pure. Pure and simple, right? You give your money, 100% goes. That's not easy to do, by the way, but we were able to do it. And to get to the point, I got a call from Colin Powell's office saying, I understand a man by the name of Zachary Fisher is coming to your dinner. And I said, yes, sir. And he said, I'd like to sit with him. I said, oh, okay, sure. Colin Powell wants to sit with somebody. Well, we're going to roger that. Secretary of the Navy called. Hi, Bill. H. Lawrence Garrett III here, Secretary of the Navy. Oh, I know who you are, sir. There were 3 people before you got on the call with me saying, please hold for the Secretary of the Navy. This is Bill White. Just please hold for the... I was standing at attention by the time the guy got on the phone. And he said, Bill, Larry Garrett here. I'm Secretary of the Navy. And I said, yes, I know that, sir. And he said, I hear you have Zachary Fisher coming to your dinner tonight. I said, yes, sir. He says, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to sit with him. That's the second call I got. Colin Powell, Secretary of the Navy. So I realized this guy, Fisher, who I'd never heard of, was probably a very important guy, very interesting, these phone calls. I was 24 years old, by the way, at the time. Wow. So I ended up saying hello to Mr. Fisher, We ended up making his table a table of 14 because everybody wanted to sit with him. So we had a piece of wood built this big, go on the table, so all those people could sit around and be with him. And I thought, wow, this is very interesting. So the next day I got a note from him saying, here's an additional $50,000. Your dinner was terrific. And he said, the only flaw to an almost perfect evening is that flowers should not be so tall that you can't see the person opposite you.
Wow.
And I thought, that's a very strange letter to get, right? Right? Hey, buddy, nice dinner, but I couldn't see Colin Powell across the table because your flowers were too tall. What's wrong with you? And I thought, this is a guy I've got to get to know. Before I did that, he had called me and said, I need you to come up to my office. So I went up to his office at 299 Park Avenue. He had the top floor. And this guy was, Greg, Jay knows this, they don't build these type of men anymore. They came from a different era.
Okay.
He was in his late 70s. He never finished high school, never served in the military. He was a bricklayer, and he had become a billionaire in the United States of America. He was worth about $12 billion. And no one in the history of our country from then until now has given more to our nation's military philanthropically than Zachary Fisher. President Clinton gave him the Medal of Freedom. And he basically sat there and said, I'm 80 years old. I don't have children. I loved what you did at that dinner to help the military, and I want to hire you. And I said, well, I'm so flattered, but I'm running my family's restaurants, five restaurants. He says, that's very nice, but I need you to start working tomorrow for me. I said, I started to get my me on, right? And I said, I'm so sorry, Mr. Fisher. I work for my father. And by the time I got home to my apartment in New York, he had called my father, and he had asked my father if my father would let him come work, let me come work for him.
Wow.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. And my dad said, sure. So some bribery must have happened on the call. I don't really know, but he was in the real estate business, right? He had built 10 60-story buildings in New York. And he said, I'd like to lease your son, is what I ended up hearing the story. I'd like to lease your son. He said, we can do renewables every year, and he would call my dad every Christmas and say, can I have another year?
Wow.
Can I have another year? I worked for him for 10 years. And I worked for his nephew for 10 years, and then the family for another 6 years after that. And he had put up $50 million of his own money to save the Intrepid in New York. If your listeners and the great people who followed the two of you on the success paradigm, I've ever been to New York, ever been to the Intrepid Museum, or ever knew somebody that served in the military, that's a place to visit when you go to New York. It's really cool, right? It's an aircraft carrier. There's a submarine. There's the Concorde. There's the Blackbird. There's the space shuttle. Really, really cool stuff. And I ended up being there for 18 years. And while running the Intrepid, there was a lot of glory and there was a lot of fun. You said, what's the story behind the glory, right?
Right.
There was a lot of great things. Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Yitzhak Rabin, the Prime Minister of Israel, right? All living presidents. I had Prince Harry, Prince William, met them all. And it was the greatest honor of my life. But really, the greatest humbling experience of my life was meeting people who served, who gave their sons and daughters, husbands, wives, mothers, fathers to our country in service to our country. It's an amazing thing, meeting somebody who has given their all for their family and for the three of us right here without even knowing who the heck we are. They don't know Greg Ray's name, right? But they're willing to die for Greg and Jay. Jay was willing to die for you, and back then he didn't even know you.
Right.
That's a pretty amazing thing, right?
It is.
So that was a very powerful convening power for me. It was about patriotism. So who can you bring together about patriotism? Everybody listening. Everybody.
Right.
People can hate the policy, they can hate the thing, they can hate the person, they can hate the personality or dislike, but they can love their country. They can love this great nation, even though it's as imperfect as it can be sometimes. And we were able to bring left, right, middle, fat like me, handsome like Jay, dapper like you. We bring them all together, right? Patriotism was a great convener. And so that network you're talking about really had nothing to do with me. It had to do with patriotism. And even today, I was standing next to President Trump at the 4th of July celebration last 4th of July. He wanted to have a big 4th of July celebration on the mall in Washington and to thank American patriots. You can disagree with them, you can dislike them, you can hate them, you can want another guy, whatever. I was very excited to be a part of that, to salute America. And he walked down he called me beforehand and said, "Hey, I want you to be there. I want to thank you," because I had gotten the fireworks donated for that whole thing. It was over $1 million. I didn't want him to get crap for spending money on fireworks. So I got somebody to donate the whole thing. It was the greatest fireworks this country's ever seen. With I don't know if you saw it last year, but it was really spectacular. And President called and said, "I'd like to see you before I go out on stage, and bring, what's his name? That's my husband, by the way. Bring Brian. Right? This is Trump. Bring what's his name?" So he comes over with the helicopters and the assault vehicles and all the earpieces, right? Right. And walks down the tent, and it's me and my husband standing there. You get that? Me and my husband standing there. And the President of the United States turns the corner and says, "Hey, Bill, Melania, this is Bill White. Remember Bill from the Intrepid?" And he says, "I've known this guy since he was a little kid when he was selling patriotism."
Wow.
Think about that. So that's 30 years later. This guy is now President of the United States, and he's kidding with me. Of course, people listening might say, "Oh, that's a crappy thing for him to say," but I get it. I get the humor. And he was being sweet. He's like, "You brought us together over patriotism." So I don't know if there's a lesson in that, honestly, but I do think if you are passionate about the thing that you're passionate about, and that's the thing that people are attracted to you for, right? You're not promoting it. I don't think people like promoters. I think people like being attracted to something, not promoted to something, right? So if that was attracting people, then I guess it worked, because I've met some really great people and I've learned so much from them. And I'm talking way too much to you two guys.
No,
But that was a little ride through the trail of the network of patriotism.
Well,
See the
that's
little,
quite a
that
ride.
thing?
By the way, I would tell you, Bill, I'm pretty certain that we're going to be doing this podcast for a while. You should know you're the first person to get a call from the White House during a podcast. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're the only person that actually said, "I'll call him back later," all in the same podcast. So, so that's.
I wish I could have. You would have thought, "Oh, this guy is a real handball." He staged the call from the White House. I swear to God, I did not. But you know what? Whenever I'm with Jay, all this good stuff happens. So I don't know. I'm going to start to give Greg some credit for this, Jay. You better watch out.
That would not. Hey, look.
I don't give him any credit. So
He does. I'm going to say, don't start now. I mean, I would be uncomfortable with that. So I do. That was amazing. One of the things when I was reading your bio, Bill, that I was struck with is that it's filled with philanthropy and philanthropic efforts. And you kind of talked a little bit about, well, you talked very substantively about how that kind of evolved over time, especially your love of patriotism and the military. But so I want to rewind the tape back, because I like to rewind the tape. We do that all the time. Rewind the tape back. There you go. Before Fordham.
I'm about to put that on the board.
Yeah. When
Lola.
what exactly was it that made Bill White that kind of turned the philanthropic switch, the giving switch? Because a lot of what you're doing is, I mean, I think you've been successful because you've given so much of yourself and helped so many other causes, and that's a common thing that we're hearing. But what was it that, was there kind of a seminal moment, or was it just the way you were raised to be?
Greg, that's a really very insightful question. I'll tell you why, because I've thought a lot about this in recent years. What is that thing? And I may sound a little negative on myself, because I usually am pretty hard on myself and a self-critique. I can't honestly say, oh, my mom just, told me this, or my dad told me this, or I think it had something to do, for sure. Let me rephrase this. I think it had a lot to do with my parents, because they were very giving, loving people. I'd have somebody over at our house, on Thanksgiving that, to be quite honest with you, I didn't want to spend Thanksgiving with. But my parents invited them because they didn't have anybody to be with. And, when you're young like that and you're sitting next to somebody maybe you don't know as much, or they're not part of the family, and you're wondering, why is Bob here? This is our family thing. That's a very immature way to think. And today I look back and go, wow, that was pretty heartless to say those things I did to my parents at the time. But they did that, right? So I learned a lot of that from them. Right? My parents grew up Catholic, and they were, we went to mass every Sunday, and they weren't weird the rest of the week, and then they went to church, and were Sunday people. They were the same, 7 days a week. And I think that gave me a good sense of faith and belief in Jesus Christ, is where I sit in the spectrum. And he was a giver of his life for others. I think that ties a lot to the patriotism that soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen, give of themselves for others. So that tied together. But I also think being adopted and being an only child actually has some negative things that maybe got spun into what sounds like positive. But when you're an only child, you have brothers and sisters, right? So you're interrelating with others. And I, at a young age, would interrelate with a lot of older people in my town. And I think I learned a lot from them. I learned what I didn't want to be like. And I learned stuff that I liked. And I had a pretty good menu of really interesting people. Super successful people, super simple people, super religious people, atheists. I had them all colors, all creeds, all sexes, all stuff, right? And I also think, like, when you're in that adoption conundrum, because it's a blessing, it's an amazing thing, it's a gift of life for people who can't have kids for whatever reason, right? And I had no better parents that a little boy could ever want to have, for sure. But that sense of, why was I given up? What happened? I don't know any of that. So there's a little bit of an open circle there that I think individuals fill. So making others feel good, because maybe I wasn't feeling so great, was a thing I've done my whole life. And that's not entirely healthy, Greg, right? That's an answer. It's an honest answer from within.
Good.
But I think, I don't want to call it people pleasing, but I think making other people happy gives me pleasure. makes me happy, makes me feel good. But I've also learned later now in life that giving yourself happiness, and I will say pleasure, respectfully, is a good thing, because I think you love yourself as best you can. That allows you to love others and be good to others, right? When you're not loving yourself or good to yourself, what the heck is it good, giving it to someone else? But so I've learned from that. I don't know if that answers the question,
It
but
does, and it probably started at people pleasing, but it sounds like it became people serving over time.
interesting. Interesting. I like that.
And
Yeah.
and so it kind of marries with everything else you've shared. So thank you for the candor in that answer. That was great. That was great.
Thank you.
So if someone asked me the top two reasons that Bill White's successful, they asked me, this is what I would say, and I'm going to form this into a question. But the first, I just learned about the network and how you built the network, and I think you don't give yourself a lot of credit on how you maintain and retain those relationships and friendships. And I think number two, why you're successful, has a lot to do with number one, and that's the solution driven mentality that you have in every single scenario that I've seen you in. And when I talked to you about this yesterday, and I don't remember the exact problem, I just remember walking down the street with you in New York City, and something came up, and there were three or four of us walking, and all of us were like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do?" And then within seconds, you spotted something, found a solution, and you just went into this mode that I just always thought was amazing, and that I wanted that attribute in my life. And I learned from you. So, where did you? I know the EMT thing had something to do with it because you had to react very quickly in those situations. But where did that come from? And do you see that as being, the number two reason? Because every time a situation comes up, you always get into this mode and find an answer right away. You never find an excuse, you find an answer. So elaborate on that solution mode that you have.
Well, you got the grilling going on today. This is good stuff. Billy will think about yourself. You will ponder. But that's Jay. I'm trying to remember what it was too. But we've had a lot of those moments together. We really have, and we've had so much fun too. We've done some really amazing things in life and substantive things. And I'm just thinking about the center that we built, $200 million in Texas. And it was looking at a problem and realizing, you were the person that had to figure this out, or, someone else could do it. And when you're standing, at that car accident with, you have your training, right? The training is the best thing. I was, you know how to do CPR, you know how to do first aid, and then you learn how to be an EMT, then you learn how to be a paramedic. And in that, you learn how to be a fireman, you learn how to be a chef, you learn how to be a Coast Guard captain. I was doing way too many things at a young age. I think, Greg, that answers a little bit of the other thing. At that age, having all those things done, I could do a lot of things. I could figure a lot of things out. But training hard, learning hard, having experiences to utilize that kind of training was pretty wild, right? I was on over 2,000 emergency calls. I have 8 pre-hospital saves where the person had died in the field, and we brought them back, and I lost a lot of people. I can't remember how many people that I lost. It's hard to keep track of those things because those are sad things, right? But so being in the medical emergency thing makes you think really quick on your feet. You see what's going on with the COVID everywhere. If somebody comes in, you got to know what to do, or bad things happen real quick, right? For them and for you, especially with COVID. You forget to put your mask on, you don't think you could get COVID, right? So you got to think not just taking care of the patient, but taking care of yourself too. So I'm fascinated by all that right now. But also working for Fisher was not easy, right? I was his right-hand man lefty, right? So Bill White, I want the space shuttle. Click. He hung the phone up. That was it. Let me call back. Mr. Fisher, what did you say? You said that you want a space shuttle. What the hell does that mean? Figure it out. Click. Okay. Get the team in. Figure out, how do you get a space shuttle? You call the guy who runs NASA. How do you get him? You called Senator Schumer at the time. He knows him. How do you tow it, paint it, build it, raise the money for it, put it on the flight deck, seal it? How do you protect it from the weather? How do you have a grand opening? I mean, Fisher would say, hey, we're having 10,000 Navy. Nothing was small with this guy, right? We're having 10,000 sailors to New York. It's called Fleet Week. Bill, have you heard of that? Yes, sir. You're running that now. Okay. Okay, what? I'm 26. What do you mean, okay? Running what? I don't even. That. Talk about getting fed to the lions. And he would let you know when you were doing a shitty job pretty quick, right? Mm. Hey, Bill, if you don't get this right, I'm going to fire you. He was tough. It was tough love. We loved each other. But he taught me a lot, Jay. He was not helping me with the problem solving. He was giving you a mission, and then he was hanging the phone up. So you had to figure it out. And by the way, you had to figure it out pretty darn quick. So all those moving parts, right? We started a program called Fisher House, right? This is the idea that Fisher's at a dinner with the chief of naval operations. The chief of naval operations is a 4-star admiral, first Jewish guy, first enlisted guy. By the way, the shortest guy ever to be in any of those Joint Chiefs jobs. He was a great guy, Mike Borda. And because Fisher was Jewish, they had a great rapport together. It was like, almost like his father. And Borda's telling Fisher that his wife volunteers at Bethesda, and one night she brings this guy home who's all wet, and he was sleeping in his car. It was pouring rain out, and his wife is dying at the Navy hospital, and he doesn't have a place to stay. And so the admiral says, to Fisher, we took him in, we brought him home, and he's thinking Fisher's going to say, great job, Admiral, that's terrific. He slams the plate down on the table and he screams at the guy, you son of a bitch. Why does he have to sleep in a car? This is the Navy. So he calls me, he says, we're going to build a house. I don't know how we're going to do it. You figure it out. Click.
Oh, wow.
So how does this private citizen get land across the street from a military hospital on a military base and then build a house that he's going to donate, Navy lighting, electrical, HVAC? It's not going to happen, Mr. Fisher. Guess what? There are 63 houses all across America's major military medical bases with the Fisher House right across the street. We figured out a way how to give us the land for 18 months just to build the house. We build the house the way we want. You don't tell us how to build it. We're going to build it the way we want to build it. So it's nice and beautiful. And like Mr. Fisher would live in. He wanted Sergeant Atkins, right, or Colonel Gray to be in a beautiful home with crown molding and fluffy furniture and 5 refrigerators in the kitchen and ice cream for the kids while their fathers and mothers were dying in the hospital from serving our country, right? And then we realized we had to do these at veteran hospitals. So the long answer to that is, I think Fisher was the most major lobber of problems to figure out. And as his chief of staff, I was responsible for figuring out how to execute. And it was the greatest experience of a lifetime, right? We were in the meeting with Secretary of Defense, and we said, you can either do it the easy way, or this guy Fisher is going to call 60 Minutes.
Oh, boy.
What do you want to do? And I say that lovingly because all the secretaries of defense were great. Like when the Intrepid got stuck in the mud, we had to be ready for this. Do you have 2 seconds?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so I'm running this museum, right? Bankrupt, 100,000 visitors. I'm 24, 25. Fisher, right? Run it. Click. Good luck. Okay, 250 employees, 100,000 people. It's bankrupt. Thanks a lot. You know, he had put up $50 million. He didn't want to put up any more money. He wanted it run right. So we took it out of bankruptcy. We got it to 1 million visitors, right? We raised $2 billion, $1.5 billion by the time we'll tell that story in 2010, where I was fired from that job. Very interesting, right? And we got the space shuttle, the British Airways Concorde. We had 1 million military personnel come visit for fleet weeks. And the pier that the ship was on was falling in the water, falling apart. Old New York City pier, falling apart. Needed a new pier. Well, okay, that's great. But we have an aircraft carrier attached to that pier that's stuck in the mud for 24 years. Okay, well, so take it out. Okay, how do you do that? Click. Figure it out, right? You get the clicking? Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting
so,
that, yeah.
By the way, this is his Yankee ring right there. That's Zachary Fisher's
That's awesome.
New York Yankee ring, 1977. I wear it every day. He was my mentor and my great second father in many ways. And so essentially, we had to figure out how to take this aircraft carrier off the pier, demolish the pier, rebuild the pier. As soon as you move the ship, you're going to have to put it in dry dock for a certain amount of time while the pier's getting rebuilt. You have to close the museum. You just got to 1 million visitors, 1 million visitors out of bankruptcy. That's pretty nuclear option. And I had 256 employees that I was going to have to let go, all of them.
Wow.
Who'd been there 20, 30, 20, 24 years. And I said, first of all, we're not going to fire anybody. We're going to raise the money to keep them working throughout the 2.5 years. We had to raise 60 million for the pier. It ended up being 115 million, almost double. Construction in New York, union labor, all kinds of things. And we figured it out. And we did it as a team. We did it, Mayor Giuliani, whose father-in-law served on the Intrepid, Mike Bloomberg. I went through 3 mayors, David Dinkins, who was a great Marine, who started this thing off, and Ed Koch, actually 4 mayors, excuse me. So, problem solving from the littlest thing to the biggest thing. One of the greatest things I ever had fun doing was Mr. Fisher loved entertaining the troops. So the fleet would come in and he'd say, hey, Bill, what do you think? What about Natalie Cole? I said, for what? To sing for them. Oh, yeah, that'd be great, Mr. Fisher. Okay, get her. Click. Get her. Okay. Natalie Cole, right? Roberta Flack, Tony Bennett. Name them. He would put on these concerts to just say thank you to the military. So we were part of all that. And if you think about his idea of Fisher House, getting that done was just incredible. And he's been dead since 1999. And 60 more houses have been built since his death. So that continues, right? I think a nice thing for all of us when we leave this lovely place is that the good work that we did continues in some way. Not, for this, but just for the good of it. It's a nice thing. It's a great tribute, I think, to him.
Well, wow. So I eventually you're going to have to tell us how you can raise, $1.5 billion and do all this stuff and get fired. That we're definitely coming back to that before we get off.
I like that. I like that pisses you off. That's good.
It does. It is. Well, it makes the point of how the journey towards success is not a straight line. That it is just this weird, like etch-a-sketch that somebody else from time to time grabs, turns upside down, and shakes, and then you have to start all over again. So And it kind of makes sense based on what you've said. So here's, you ready for my next question, Bill? Because I'm just
Absolutely.
queuing these up here. So I'm guessing, because from all indications you are human, even though I'm having to check that out because a couple of things you said make me wonder whether that you have an extra rung on your DNA ladder.
Something wrong, right? Something's
Yeah,
wrong with this guy.
or something very right. Something very right. Tell me about a time, I'm assuming there was one, where you just said, even if for a few moments, you know what, to hell with this. I'm just done. I'm just done. And what happened to make you lift out of that moment and get back in the game?
Wow. Uh, Even better question than the last one. Jay, watch out for him, okay? This is just Tuesday, okay? This is Tuesday. This is a tactic to allow me to think, right,
I
for an
understand.
answer. Right? No, I'm
Well
kidding.
played, sir.
I'm
Well
kidding.
played,
I'm
sir.
kidding. I'm kidding. No. So I've had a few of those moments, and I don't. If everybody's not asleep already at this moment, is I had a lot of masters. I think that's a lesson in life. Be careful how many masters you allow into your life, because it's an allowance, right? It's your choice. My choice was I had all the people on the board, right, who were doing a lot for us, right? You can't raise $1 million, let alone $1 billion, without a lot of people's help,
Right.
and a lot of people sharing in your general vicinity, right? That's the key word. This is like right here, they're with you. But when they give you their money, then they want to say something over here. And then the other one wants to go drag you over here. And then my head's fat enough already, but they were pulling me this way and pulling me that way, right? And so at a certain point, what I allowed myself to do in pleasing a lot of those people was at a detriment to myself.
Okay.
So it worked for the greater good, right? Of the Intrepid and its mission, right? Did that for 20 years, but I was intertwined with the mission. That was my identity. That was, Bill White, the Intrepid. So someone say, "Oh, Bill White from the Intrepid." It wouldn't say Bill White. It would say Bill White, the guy from the Intrepid Bill White. I mean, it was in the New York Times that way. It was in the Post. It was still to this day. People call me for tickets to the Intrepid. I've been gone for going on 11 years, right? And I still arrange the tickets. So part of having too many masters in life, it can be very tough on anyone's psyche, their personality, their ability to move themselves forward. So that's a negative thing. And there were moments when I just wanted to say bugger off, right? Because that's just personalities, right? There was nothing about the Intrepid or that mission that ever had me down and out or sad or disappointed or angry. It was just about the people involved, right? And like every great charity, there are great philanthropists, and there are also great egos. A lot of people give their money away. They don't want anybody to know. Nobody. In fact, they have documents. I got a $180 million donation from one guy, and if I ever told who it was, there were civil penalties to talking about that. I can now talk about it because the guy's name is David Gelman, and he was the biggest donor to the ACLU, and he didn't want to be known as donating to anything related to war, but he loved supporting veterans. So he made a deal with me. That was the deal. The reason I'm allowed to say it is because he basically ran out of money, gave $400 million away, and no more money to give. So he's okay with everybody knowing because he didn't have any more to give. He didn't want people calling him, I don't think. Okay, so that was interesting. But then there were people who wanted their name in 24 font, Helvetia, this big. I like the D this big. And, you know, when your ego gets in the way, I always say, like, ego stands for easing God out. So, you know, you got God, you know, you're walking with, or you have faith, or you have something greater than yourself, you're going to be great. When ego gets in the way, it's tough. So anyway, I've had a lot of that to deal with. And that's also a learning experience, how to get someone to support what you're doing, whether it's a business deal, a personal deal, a philanthropic deal, whatever that is. You know, even being friends with, you know, people like nobody's perfect. I'm certainly not. And you can't love everything about everybody all the time. So that's a good learning experience too. But it was really very hard. And then when Fisher died, I had to work. I chose, to work with his nephew, who was a great man, half of Fisher's age. He was killed in a plane crash, along with his wife and his two pilots and his two friends. And he was left with 5 children under the age of 14, who I had to go tell that both of their parents had died in a plane crash. So I've been through, I thought that was kind of the end of my Intrepid career. That was pretty dark moment. And his one daughter is the only survivor of the plane with a broken leg. She crawled out of the plane that was on fire and she survived. Tora Fisher, great hero. But I ended up then working for another nephew, and they were very different people. Greg, you know, you think you're working for patriotism, you're doing this thing, and then wait, I got a new boss. And I got another new boss. That boss died. This guy was killed in a plane crash. Now I got the other nephew. And he didn't hang the phone up. He liked yelling on the phone. So I've had some great experiences, but I never pulled the plug because I thought the mission was more important than myself. And, you know, that would be allowing my ego to get into the middle of the success of the mission. So those were tough moments.
Thank you.
So, Billy, couple more questions. One that I always ask on every podcast is, you know, I'm a big believer in having daily habits, daily rituals, things that create success. So, for our listeners, what is one habit that you do, or that you're committed to every single day that you feel has changed your life?
I learned something in some trials and tribulations that I had in my life, losing my parents and having some dark moments, that, you know, it's not what you did a minute ago, it's your next right action. You know, what's your next right action, right? You could have a really bad thing come out of your mouth 5 seconds ago, or something that you regretted doing, but you can't, you know, forgiveness is giving up all hope of a better past, right? Our pasts will never get any better than they were, right? So forgiveness is giving up all of that, of a better past, because it is what it is, right? Not going to change your past. So I am very good at forgiving myself. I try not to have to do that, you know, often. And doing the next right thing always, and also trying to do esteemable acts every day, because that's good for me. Which means I'm not doing anything for me. I'm doing things for others. Whenever I get out of my own head and I'm doing something for someone else, I always am feeling better. Always. So dark moments, bad days, tough things, do something for someone else. I do it all the time, and it helps me a lot. But the specific answer, Jay, is honor myself, right? Love myself every day. And then in a parallel, I'll say this: Brian and I have been together for 19 years. That's like 108 in gay, like dog years, right? That's like 2 lifetimes, right? And you know Brian, and he loves you, and Amina and Luna and Christian, and I think part of having great fun in life is doing esteemable things for your soulmate, right? And in the process, you're doing that for yourself. So that may be a little too mushy for this, but for me, that's a repeatable thing every day. If like a routine is I get up at the same time every day, I go to bed at the same time pretty much every day. I don't drink a lot. I'm eating too much in the COVID. Okay, I'll admit that. I need to get back to more exercise. Right, there's some things I'm needing to do, but I come to work, pretty much same time every day and put a full day of work in every day, as hard as I can.
Nice.
Very good. So I know you got another question, Jay.
I do. So I have an idea of this, but I want it to be in your words, Bill. What do you want your legacy to be in another 20 years? Like, what do you want to be known for? I know the military, but what your actual legacy, like what you like for someone to say, Bill White, like?
Well, if I give a quote, which I very quietly live by. Maybe this is the first time. I wrote it in the book, then I took it out. But it was Fisher's quote. So he lived by a very interesting quote by Khalil Gibran, who was a great philosopher of the day way back. And I love it, and I try to live by it every day. But it goes like this, he who gives of material things gives nothing. He who gives of himself gives all. So, I want to be the guy who is known as giving of himself for others. Like, I think that goes way back to the being Catholic, being brought up, follower of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ gave of himself for others, gave a whole hell of a lot, actually. Gave his own life. And it sounds a little mushy, but it's really true. So I think patriot, successful businessman, philanthropist, all those corny things, but, good husband is really my favorite thing lately. I'd like that to be on my tombstone. I was a good husband.
Nice. Well, at this time, I want to thank you, Bill, for spending your time. I know you got to get to that White House call very soon.
Hey, you guys got to come to the 4th of July, right? I'll send you some masks you can wear, and you can fly on the outside of the wing of the plane, okay, with the suit on, and you'll come up to Washington, and you can, tell the president what you think about what he's doing. Be fun.
That's awesome.
Well, at this time, what I like to do is, again, this is the success paradigm, and really we want to dig into people, why they're successful. And you see me writing a lot because when I get some nuggets, I always want to recap what made you successful and kind of put it in my own words with your words included. So I want to do that real quick, and then we'll wrap this up. So these, I think this is the biggest one, is be a friend first. That's a huge takeaway for me. And I don't know that I do that all the time, honestly. And I think that's something I need to work on. So thank you for that gift. I think truth of your word and honor your word. I'm always a man of my word, and I always thought that was such a great thing. But I also realized that it was a lot of my ego that was involved in that. But I think it's really a cool thing to be the truth of your word instead of honor your word. So, and then just having quality friendships. I know a lot of people that have a lot of friendships. Greg and I, you and I really, really feel like I have a quality friendship where if I call you or I call Greg, you guys answer. So that's another one I don't know that a lot of people have. Be passionate about being passionate is another great takeaway. Just you are, and everything that you do and touch, you're passionate about it. If it's helping people, raising money, I've seen that firsthand myself. Be hard on yourself. I think, a lot of people say they are hard on themselves, but I think if you go back and you listen to this podcast, as successful as you are, I think what you'll hear is that you're still hard on yourself and you still don't feel like you have done everything that you want to do. And then constant self-constructive criticism. I love that. We are always giving constructive criticism to others, but I think always giving ourselves that constant constructive self-criticism is a great takeaway. And where your solution comes from are experiences. So a lot of times you're in a situation and you might not have the solution, but the next time you will from the past experiences. So I think it's just a positive way to look at becoming a solution driven person. Maybe you don't have it right now, but your experience, if you go back to that experience, that will help you. Um, and then tough love, I give a lot of tough love. And I will be honest, though, I don't take tough love well. And I'm going to start because I think, hearing your story about Mr. Zach Fisher and the tough love that he gave you, the reason he did that is because he knew that you could accomplish it, right? He knew when he hung up the phone, he knew what made you tick. And I think a lot of times when people do give you tough love, that's why they're doing it, because they know you're capable of doing it and it made you who you are. So I think that's another great takeaway. I'm almost done. I have lots. One thing to talk about that I noticed throughout, and I always notice when I talk to you, and then I'm also very, very bad at this, and that's remembering names. You remember every single person's name, not just their first name, you remember their first name and their last name, which I've always thought was super fascinating. Um, and then when ego gets in the way, it gets tough. So when your ego gets in the way, it really makes a lot of situations a lot tougher. So you got to remove the ego, which is such a hard thing to do.
So hard. Yep.
And I think this is another one. You can't love everything about everybody. There's just going to be things that you're not going to like about them, and you have to accept it. And to give yourself to others, I think, is a big reason that you're really, really successful, because it's authentic as hell. I've seen it many, many times where you really just, I'm going to tell a really quick story. So when I met Billy, I was 26, I believe, and I had a tag watch. And if you know me, I love watches. I love them. It's a passion of mine. I like to collect them. And I went skydiving with Billy. For the first time ever. And he could tell I was really nervous. And he had a Rolex that I wanted. I wanted a Rolex. I always wanted a Rolex, but couldn't afford a Rolex at that time because I was super poor. And he could sense that I was super stressed and I didn't really want to go. And he's like, everything is going to be okay. You're going to jump out. You're going to be fine. Nothing's going to happen. He's like, matter of fact, let's switch watches, because this Rolex that you love, I'm going to let you wear it on this jump. And I just remember thinking, I don't think I would ever take a Rolex off my wrist and let someone jump out of a plane. And hit the ground. That was just his way of taking my mind off it. So it's just, you have a skill for doing really special things, and I'll never forget that. And it's made me a different person meeting you, Billy, and watching you through the years. And then I think the biggest one that Greg Gray talks to me about um, uh, is forgiveness is giving up um, a better past, and to forgive yourself. So
Yeah.
thank you for all of those gifts today. And, I think what's the most unique thing about this podcast is the different walks of life that we have and the different ways that people have success. And some are just hard chargers and, relentless habits, relentless consistency. And I just think today, listening, if people actually take the time to listen to this, they can learn a lot from you on some different elements and ingredients that create success. So thank you for getting on here and being transparent and sharing. And I know Greg wanted to talk about the firing. I think we should do another podcast.
Absolutely.
So I mean, and I think that, and not to interrupt you, Greg, I just think,
Yeah.
Again, as successful as you are, you can still make a mistake, or still, someone
Yes, sir.
get you, but it's what you do with that and what you learn from that. And I think that's going to be another podcast, but I'll go ahead and let you wrap up, Greg.
Yeah. So all of that, and the actually seeing ego as an acronym, that blew me away. Easing God out. ego is about easing God out. And how simple is that? It's hard to wrestle with that one. I mean, as soon as you say, I
That's a tough one.
I can't unhear that now. And the last
Sorry.
thing, no, well, thank you, and I hate you at the same time. I think is where I was going to go with that. But I think the thing that I would say last as we get ready to close this out is that one of the things that you talked about, I think we actually may have pulled off in this podcast, and that is having you as a guest was definitely the next right action. You mentioned that, and I think that's what it was for us and everybody that's listening to
That's
this.
very kind of you.
So thank you so much, Bill. We appreciate you, and I looking forward to being in the same space with you at some point.
Yeah, when we're allowed, I can't wait because I can tell by watching you and hearing how you come up with your your approach to this, that a lot of people will be learning a lot and benefiting from you and from Jay. I've always benefited from him. I'm going to not give him so many compliments, but I could tell in your smile and just the kind of person that you are, even though we haven't met. I'm really looking forward to meeting you when we're allowed to and when it's safe and healthy and all that. Don't want anybody to say, "Oh, they're going to meet tomorrow." Oh my God, But it's been a great pleasure and honor, and I do hope to see you soon. And Jay, you know how much I love you and love to the family and everybody, and to both of you. I hope you're staying healthy and well, and I know you're staying productive.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Bill.
God bless you guys.